And I'm still missing one timekeeper. There she is. Hello. All right. Team members, do you promise that the presentation you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? Everybody, thumbs up if that's yes. Excellent. All right. Witnesses, do you promise the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the witness statements, that you will not add material or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? Thumbs up if you agree. Excellent. Thank you. Since we don't have gallery members that I can see, or teachers or coaches, I was going to skip this one. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
you're supposed to do.
All right, scoring panelists, can you raise your right hands? Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition?
Absolutely.
Excellent, thank you. Timekeepers, you may now disappear unless you have other arrangements with your team. And scoring judges, you can now turn off your videos as well. All right. We are now on the record in the people of the state of Colorado versus Avery Becker. This is 20 CR 3101. My name is Heidi Kutcher. I am the judge today. May I have entry of the appearance for the prosecution, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Your Honor, opposing counsel and distinguished members of the jury. My name is Lydia Brisky, and today I represent the state of Colorado as a prosecution attorney. This evening, I will be conducting the direct examination of Kyle Kuzak and the cross-examination of Taylor Perkins. Permission for my co-counsel to introduce themselves?
Yes, granted.
Good evening. My name is Ainsley Bidgood. I will be conducting the direct examination of Jordan Markowitz and the cross of Blake Van Owen. Additionally, I will be doing the opening statement.
Good evening. My name is Janie Nelsh, and I will be conducting the direct of Alex Cifuentes, and I will be crossing Avery Becker, as well as performing the closing.
Thank you. And may I have entry of appearance for the defense, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Natalie Burnham, and I am a defense attorney for the defendant Avery Becker. I will be conducting the direct examination of Professor Blake Van Owen, as well as the cross-examination of Detective Jordan Markowitz. Permission for my co-counsel to introduce themselves.
Yes, please go ahead.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Sophia Mestis, and I will be directing Taylor Perkins, crossing Kyle Kuzak, and delivering the closing argument.
Good evening. My name is Lucy Kiefer, and I will be conducting the direct examination of Avery Becker, the cross-examination of Alex Cifuentes, and will be delivering the opening statement as well.
All right, thank you. Do we have any preliminary matters?
Yes, Your Honor, but before the preliminary housekeeping matters, can we have our witnesses introduce themselves?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Good evening, I'm Molly Hallam, and I will be playing Jordan Markowitz.
My name is Lauren Garofalo, and I'll be Kyle Kuzak.
Good evening, my name is Kate Sutherland, and I'm Alex Cifuentes.
In defense, would you like to have your witnesses introduce themselves?
Yes, Your Honor.
Hello, my name is Trinity Doyle, and I'll be Blake Van Owen.
Hello, my name is Julie Perry, and I will be playing Taylor Perkins.
Good evening, my name is Ruth Hurlinger, and I am Avery Becker.
All right, thank you. Now, do we have any preliminary matters?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution has 4 housekeeping matters at this time. First, we request that the stipulated facts are constructively read into the record. Second, we request that any time not used in closing argument is reserved for rebuttal. And third, we request that all exhibits are published to the jury after admission. Additionally, we understand that there are multiple methods when entering an exhibit on a virtual format. One where the attorney screen shares the exhibit as they lay foundation, and the other where the attorney screen shares only after it is admitted in order to publish it to the jury. Is there one that you prefer?
There is not. So whichever works best for you all is fine.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our housekeeping matters.
All right, defense?
No housekeeping matters at this time, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. All right, so I will constructively read into the record the stipulated facts that are in the information, and timekeepers will be able to reserve your time in closing, okay? As well as we will publish to the jury once if it is and anything is admitted. All right. All right. So if we are ready to go, if you are not speaking, you guys are great at muting and unmuting. Thank you. You and you do not, if you want to stay on camera, that's fine. If you're not called as a witness, I'm okay with you turning off your camera when you're not on as a witness, okay? Or not doing direct or cross. So are you ready to proceed? Wait, I switched pages, one moment. Ms. Bidgood, I believe you're doing opening. Are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, please to go ahead.
Right place, right time, right defendant. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Ainsley Bidgood, and we are here today because Mackenzie Brackman was killed in his home the afternoon of March 6th. The evidence will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Avery Becker committed murder in the first degree and burglary in the second. Avery Becker was a senior at Colorado High School, where Mackenzie Brackman was the head coach for mock trial. The evidence will show that Avery has a history of rash decision-making and letting her emotions control her actions. Avery was not at school the day of the murder. Avery claims that Avery and Taylor were skipping school to look for Avery's phone Avery had lost at Fry Shack the day before, but the evidence proves otherwise. Expert witness Kyle Kuzak will testify that the perpetrator caught in the Ring doorbell was the same build and height as Avery. Right place. You will hear from expert witness Detective Jordan Markowitz that Avery was at Brackman's house the day of the murder. Right time. The Ring doorbell footage will show a person in the same build and height as Avery at the time of the murder. Right defendant. Avery has a history of criminal mischief against Brackman. Avery even told her mom Avery would get back at Brackman if it was the last thing she did. Alex Fuentes will testify to Avery's character and history of rash decision-making. Right place, right time, right defendant. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, this cannot be a coincidence. Avery has a history of Avery has made a rash decision to burglarize Brackman's house. She let her emotions take over and she killed him. Now she has to pay. Remember what Avery told her mom. Avery said she would do anything to get back at Brackman if it was the last thing she did. So members of the jury, we ask for a verdict of guilty of murder in the first degree and burglary in the second. Thank you.
I believe you're muted, Your Honor.
Thank you. I'm not as good as mute with this. Ms. Kiefer, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, I am, Your Honor.
All right, please go ahead.
Garbage in, garbage out. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Lucy Kiefer, and today, my co-counsel and I are here today to represent Mr. Avery Becker in this case. Mr. Becker was just your everyday high school student. He went to class and even participated in a mock trial and won awards for his performance. Mackenzie Brackman was Mr. Becker's coach and never appreciated him for his accomplishments. In spite of their rocky relationship, Mr. Becker was devastated at the loss of his coach. Then came the shock of being accused of being the murderer. Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel, today Mr. Becker is being accused of a crime he never committed. Today we will call to the stand Professor Blake Van Owens, an expert in the field of cell tower analysis, reconstruction, and forensic evidence techniques, who will confirm that most of the elements in this case seem rushed or under-investigated and lead towards a heavy confirmation bias. She will tell us that the police chose the easy culprit, not the real one, and explain how the police chose an answer before examining the evidence. We will also call Taylor Perkins to the stand, Avery's best friend and someone he was with the entire day of the murder. Taylor will recount Avery and their coach's complex relationship and how Avery was just frustrated, not angry. And finally, we will call Avery Becker to the stand, the accused himself, to explain his side of the story and tell that he was just searching for his lost phone the day that Mr. Brackman's murder took place. He was looking for forgiveness and ended up a murder suspect. Let me remind the jury of the burden of proof. The prosecution must prove that, beyond a reasonable doubt, Avery Becker was at Mr. Brackman's house to break into his and trash his house. He murdered him. Garbage in, garbage out. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kiefer. And prosecution, are you ready to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution called Jordan Markowitz to the stand.
All right. Ms. Markowitz, you are under oath, so go ahead and proceed, Ms. Bidgood.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon. Can you please state your name and spell your last for the record?
Good afternoon. My name is Jordan Markowitz, Markowitz.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a homicide detective with the Denver Police Department.
How long have you been a homicide detective?
Well, I started my career with DPD roughly 13 years ago, and I have been a detective for 7 years.
Do you have any specialized training?
I do.
What is your training in?
My training is in cell phone technology and forensic data recovery.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you received your certification?
I got my certification from the American Academy of Law Enforcement, and I took a training course and passed an exam to receive it.
Your Honor, we move to enter witness as an expert in phone technology, forensic data recovery, and homicide investigation, pursuant to Rule 702.
Can you please repeat those 3 areas for me?
Yes. Phone technology, forensic data recovery, and homicide investigation.
Thank you. Ms. Burnham, do you have any objections to Detective Markowitz being an expert witness in this hearing, in this trial?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to voir dire.
Granted.
Thank you. Detective Markowitz, is it true that your cell phone training course was only 3 days long?
That is true.
The defense objects to Detective Jordan Markowitz being entered as an expert in cell phone tracking due to the lack of education in the area.
I'm going to allow Ms. Bidgood to explore the training, since Ms. Burnham's question was a little vague for me.
All right. Detective Markowitz, can you tell us about how thorough the 3-day course was?
It was, sorry, can you repeat the question?
Your case with the 3-day course was thorough, correct?
That is true. It was intensive and full of information.
And you had to pass an exam to get the certification, correct?
That is true.
I don't think that Jordan Markowitz would have passed the exam and been certified in this area if they were not ready to be an expert in this area.
And can one of you please ask what the training was about? What topic?
Yeah, what did the 3-day course cover?
I learned about the types of cell phones and records that can be obtained and how to use forensic software such as the Celebrite system to download information off of the cell phone. I also learned how to acquire and interpret cellular records. And then I also was able to learn how to obtain and interpret cell tower data.
Right. Ms. Burnham, can you repeat what your objection, which of the 3 are you objecting to Detective Markowitz being an expert in?
The defense objects only to cell phone tracking due to the fact that this education was only 3 days long.
And for cell phone tracking, is that the data recovery portion of the?
Yes, Your Honor, the data recovery.
I'm going to go ahead and admit Detective Markowitz as an expert in phone technology, homicide investigation, and data recovery. Please proceed, Ms. Biggood.
Can you describe a little bit more about how you use your training with cell phone data during an investigation?
Sure. During my training, I learned about forensic software and how it can be used to download information off the cell phone. And then I learned how to obtain and interpret cell tower data.
Can you tell me a little bit about how cell towers can track a location?
Forensic software such as the Celebrate system can download information off the phone. We can then go through that data and find the location of the cell phone.
Can you tell me about how this information relates to Avery's case?
The data we obtained was able to show that Avery Becker's cell phone was found in the area of Brackman's house.
Detective Markowitz, do you have a copy of what has been previously marked as Exhibit 16?
Yes.
Your Honor, do we have permission for my co-counsel to screen share what has been previously marked as Exhibit 16?
Yes.
My apologies. I'm working on that right now.
It's okay. And I ask the timekeepers during this if you'll pause the time till we get it up, please. Do you have the ability to do it? Is it, I just want to make sure you have the permission to do it.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, just checking. There we go. Excellent. Okay, go ahead and start the time again, please.
I direct your attention to that exhibit. Would you identify it, please?
These are the cell tower records for Avery Becker's phone.
How do you know this?
I put this diagram together myself.
Is it a fair and accurate representation?
Yes.
Your Honor, we move to enter Exhibit 16 into evidence.
Ms. Burnham?
No objection, Your Honor.
So admitted.
Detective Markowitz, could you explain what this exhibit shows and tells us about Avery's cell phone?
It tells us that Avery's cell phone was found in the area of Brackman's home.
All right. Can you describe what you saw at the crime scene when you arrived?
When I arrived, I saw the victim face down on the floor just inside the residence. He was in a pool of blood. A large knife was visible on the floor just by his body, and by the angle of the body, it appeared that the victim had most likely fallen to the ground while trying to leave the residence.
What conclusions can you tell about Avery's case?
We can draw to the conclusion that Avery was in the area of Brackman's house at the time of the murder, which can give evidence of Avery intending to break in.
Did you notice anything unusual about Brackman's house when you investigated?
I did notice a broken plate on the ground along with a knocked over chair. Relative to the stabbing, though, I noticed blood splatter. This indicated to me that there must have been some sort of struggle. But what I thought was most unusual is that the expensive items such as the flat screen TV and a computer had gone untouched.
Why do you think that the expensive items weren't touched if you believe that it was intended to be a burglary?
I believe that Becker intended to break in and burglarize the house, so she would have stolen the expensive items. But when she saw Brackman, she was startled and murdered him.
Is there anything else that you noticed at the crime scene?
Yes, I located Ring doorbells.
Can you describe what a Ring doorbell is and how it relates to this case?
A Ring doorbell is a recording doorbell that can detect motion and begin a video recording of its surroundings. It relates to this case because Brackman had 3.
Were you able to access what those cameras captured?
Yes, we found on them the burglar attempting to enter Brackman's front door.
What are your final conclusions about this case?
I believe that what happened was that Becker had intended to break into Brackman's house. She was then startled to see Brackman home during a workday, and Brackman used the kitchen knife as a weapon to the unknown intruder. After that, Avery must have somehow gotten a hold of the knife and stabbed Brackman.
Thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Burnham, do you have any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Miss Markowitz. Today I'll be asking you some questions about your involvement in this case. Is it true that in your statement you say that the slight disarray in Mr. Brackman's house could have been nothing out of the ordinary?
That is true.
And you also say that expensive items, such as a TV and computer, were left undisturbed.
Mm-hmm.
So, because nothing of value in this house was stolen or even disturbed, there's very little evidence from the crime scene that this was intended to be a burglary. Isn't that right?
Right. That is true.
Let's talk about your correspondence with Alex Cifuentes. I understand that you spoke with Alex about some text messages between her and Avery.
Yes.
But you never received proof of this communication.
No, Alex had left her phone at home, so I just thought it would be okay that she send me screenshots, because I understand that talking to the cops can be a little bit of a unsettling topic, and it would make people act differently than they normally would.
Right. So you accepted just screenshots that could potentially be faked as proof of a murder?
That is true, but I had enough evidence.
But you never saw these text messages on Alex Cifuentes' phone, did you?
Not specifically.
Even though Miss Cifuentes offered to come back to the station with her phone?
Yes, again, I knew that Alex was distressed and I didn't want to make it harder on her.
Okay, but you can't be 100% sure that these text messages were ever sent, can you?
No, but you can never be 100% sure.
Did you ever speak with the alleged sender of these text messages, Avery Becker?
I didn't. I tried to get in contact with her, but her parents told me that I wasn't allowed to talk to her because they hired a lawyer, so all further communication would have to go through the lawyer.
So you don't have proof of Avery Becker intending to burgle Mr. Brackman's house, do you?
No.
Let's talk about cell towers. Isn't it true that if a cell tower is particularly busy, it can connect with a tower up to 7 miles away?
Yep.
So cell tower data can't really give you a specific location, can it?
No, but it can give a relative one.
And you were aware that the defendant, Avery Becker, lost his phone on March 5th, 2020?
Yes.
So even if you did know the relative location of Mr. Becker's phone at the time of Mr. Brackman's death, that doesn't necessarily give you the location of Mr. Becker's person, does it?
No.
And you knew that he claimed to be looking for his phone on the day of Mr. Brackman's death.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't ever speak with Taylor Perkins to confirm or deny this alibi?
No, she wasn't a prime suspect.
But her testimony would have given you proof of the prime suspect's alibi.
That's true.
You had access to the call history of Mr. Becker's phone, didn't you?
Yes.
And this showed repeated calls from Taylor Perkins that were never picked up.
Yep.
But you never downloaded the contents of Perkins' phone to verify these calls.
I didn't. Downloading information off the phone is very difficult, and I didn't think it would lead to anything else. I followed the evidence that I gathered, and it was enough for me.
Okay, but you didn't consider that Avery Becker might not be answering his phone to these repeated calls and text messages from Taylor Perkins because he wasn't in possession of his phone, did you?
That's true.
And you didn't look into any other suspects in this case other than a young high schooler with no other motive for murder than getting kicked off the mock trial team?
I didn't, but the main reason I made Avery my prime suspect was because she's had a past of not liking Brackman and destroying his property.
Right, but she was still only kicked off the mock trial team. It's pretty steep.
That's true.
So, and also this young high schooler with not a great motive for murder might not have even been anywhere near Mr. Brackman's house on the day of the murder.
That's true.
Thank you, Ms. Markowitz. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Bidgood, do you have any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Detective Markowitz, do you believe that you gathered enough evidence to come to a clear and correct conclusion?
I do. I gathered cell tower data from Avery Becker's cell phone. I received evidence of Alex and Avery's texts, and I downloaded the contents of Brackman's cell phone. I also gathered Ring doorbell recordings of someone attempting to enter Brackman's house. I gained more than enough evidence to come to my final conclusion.
Would you ever let personal bias get in the way of your work?
Never. I take my job seriously, and I have for the past 7 years.
Thank you. No further questions. The prosecution rests.
Thank you, Ms. Burnham. Do you have any recross?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Good. Oh, there she's back. All right. Prosecution, if you want to call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Kyle Kuzak to the stand.
Hello, Ms. Kuzak. You are still under oath.
May we proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Good evening, Ms. Kuzak. Would you please state your name and spell your last for the record?
Good evening. My name is Kyle Kuzak, Kuzak.
And are you currently employed, Ms. Kuzak?
Yes.
What is your profession?
I'm a Colorado Bureau of Investigation crime scene reconstruction investigator.
And are you certified in this occupation?
I am.
How many years of experience do you have?
I've had 19 years of experience.
And where did you spend your most recent 3 years?
I have spent the most recent 3 years of my tenure with the City of Denver as a civilian employee of the Denver Police Department.
Your Honor, the prosecution moves to enter Kyle Kuzak as an expert in crime scene reconstruction pursuant to Rule 702.
Ms. Maestas.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right. She is so admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Kuzak, how are you related to the homicide at 444 South Flower Street?
I visited the scene of the homicide at 444 South Flower Street to reconstruct the crime scene. I also reviewed all of the police reports in this case, the 10 photographs from the scene, and 4 Ring security camera videos.
And do you have any key principles that guided your work in this case?
Yes, first I assume every case is going to trial, so I conducted a thorough, comprehensive investigation accordingly. Second, starting from day one, I memorized, documented, and organized all evidence with a mindset of future reconstruction.
And can you tell me more about your process when working?
I have 5 parts to ensure that I have an accurate and efficient flow when working. There are recognition and documentation, collection of evidence, evaluation.
Hold on a second.
Sorry,
Ms. Kuzak, do you need a minute?
Sorry.
Okay, stop the time. Stop the time and let's go ahead and work on that.
Sorry, don't worry about it.
It's okay. Things happen. And timekeepers, hopefully you heard me stop the time for this. Sometimes animals have a mind of their own.
Okay, sorry.
All right, Ms. Brisky, why don't you repeat your last question?
Of course. Can you tell me more about your process when working?
I have 5 parts to ensure that I have an accurate and efficient flow when working. They're recognition, documentation, collection of evidence, evaluation of evidence, hypothesis and testing, and reconstruction.
So what was your first official step in your investigation of this case?
I used a witness tracking spreadsheet to summarize key points of information from witnesses and suspects. I often find reconstruction of objective evidence useful to corroborate or refute statements.
And what other visuals did you use to help lay out this case?
I also used a physical evidence tracking sheet to identify, describe, and document observations about the evidence and my observations made at the scene.
I see. And did you do anything else?
Yes, additionally, I drew a rudimentary flowchart. These visual aids are helpful in explaining the case to others, including other experts, attorneys, and juries.
And what do you typically do after?
Well, my second and third case management steps involve preparing materials for formal analysis. In these steps, I expanded the existing organizational framework to document evidentiary relationships and analysis. When images are the focus of an in-depth analysis, like here, I find separate spreadsheets to be helpful.
So can you give us an example from this case of how organizing photos into a spreadsheet led to key information about the events of this case?
Of course. I saw photographs in this case that showed small drops of blood between the kitchen and the front door, where a knife and larger pools of blood are located. They also show blood cast off on the wall and ceiling near the front door. Organizing all of these photographs revealed a clear chronology, indicating that the victim was stabbed near the kitchen, proceeded to the front door, pulled the knife out, and dropped it there.
And what was your next step?
My fourth and final step is to formally conduct the analysis and develop a hypothesis.
And your last step?
My fifth and final step involves CSR, initial report preparation, peer review, and final reconstruction report.
So, going through this extensive process of laying out and analyzing all of this evidence, did you form an initial opinion about this case?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so then please tell us the opinion you formed about what happened on the afternoon of March 6th.
The conclusions the evidence led me to were essentially that during the afternoon of March 6, 2020, a perpetrator matching the general height and build of the defendant approached the victim's residence, initially stepping on the front porch and checking the front door as captured by a Ring door camera, then proceeding to the south side of the residence and out of the range of the camera.
So, did you look through any other type of security footage?
Yes, I did. And I saw an additional security camera on that side of the house, which picked up the perpetrator opening a fence gate and proceeding into the backyard.
So, if the perpetrator opened the fence gate, did you recover any DNA or fingerprints from it?
I did not, but contrary to popular belief, fingerprints and DNA aren't left on every surface. And more importantly, in this case, it is clear from the security videos that the perpetrator was wearing gloves.
I see. And did you see anything else in the video?
Well, the perpetrator left the range of the second camera, but was captured approximately 10 seconds later by another security camera at the rear door of the victim's residence. The video from that camera shows the perpetrator open the sliding glass doors and enter the residence.
And when you walked into the residence, did you notice anything odd?
Yes, I saw scuff marks.
And what do those typically indicate?
They indicate that at least two individuals, most likely the victim and the perpetrator, were engaged in close contact in the kitchen near the back door.
And did you see anything unusual in the kitchen?
Yes, a drawer was open in which several small knives and some other kitchen utensils were found. More importantly, a knife block was on the counter a few feet from the knife drawer.
And what was so important about the knife block?
One knife appeared to be missing from the knife block. The empty slot in the block was for a large chef's knife. The knife ultimately recovered from the body of the victim was just such a knife.
Did anything else stand out to you?
Yes, there was a broken plate on the floor 5 feet from the back door.
And what do you think caused this plate to break?
I think that the plate most likely would have been knocked to the ground as the two individuals struggled, suggesting that the struggle moved from the back door to the kitchen table.
And was that all you observed when visiting the scene of the homicide?
No, there was also a series of small droplets of blood that began near the kitchen table and led to the front door. There was a large amount of blood near the front door where the knife was recovered as well.
And so, after looking at all of this, what do you believe happened once the intruder entered the residence?
I think that the victim likely looked for a defense weapon in the knife drawer, but then took one from the knife block. The victim then confronted the intruder, and they struggled, knocking the plate to the ground. And then at some point, the intruder disarmed the victim and obtained the knife.
And what do you believe the perpetrator ended up doing with that knife?
Well, the location and position of the knife is consistent with the fact that the intruder was close to the victim, maybe in a bear hug. They reached over and stabbed them in the shoulder.
Moving on, let's talk about Blake Van Owen. Do you know them?
Yes, I know Van Owen from CSR conferences. Blake was a police officer for a short time, but he was never a CSR. They simply review the work of an actual CSRs, mostly by reading our reports and trying to find ways to reinterpret the evidence we discuss. This will never provide a person with the same degree of understanding as being on the scene or directly examining the evidence.
And do you know anything about Blake Van Owen's conclusion in this case?
Yes, I do.
So, what is their conclusion?
Blake Van Owen thinks that the intruder snuck up behind the victim and stabbed him in the back.
And what do you think of this?
I think that this is the kind of conclusion one can only reach by first deciding upon a desired outcome, then by looking only for evidence that can arguably support the predetermined conclusion. Additionally, it doesn't account for the scuff marks or the broken plate.
But even so, do you believe that the intruder could have possibly sneaked up behind the victim?
It's not likely that the intruder surprised the victim, first because of the Ring doorbell notification, and the victim would have heard the glass door open even if he didn't see the Ring notification.
So, based on the sufficient facts and data available to you, and the reliable methods and principles you applied to this case, what is your final conclusion?
That this was clearly a planned burglary gone bad. The intruder had knowledge of the victim's property and residence and likely chose a time of day when the victim's pattern would have placed him outside the home. However, the victim was present and alerted to the intruder's presence at the back of the house before the intruder entered. Unfortunately, in the ensuing struggle, the victim was killed with the same knife he introduced into the encounter.
Thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Maestas, do you have any cross?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Ms. Kuzak. Today I will be asking you a series of questions in relation to this case. Were you able to examine all evidence relating to this case?
No, I was not.
Are you aware that certain photographs of evidence, such as the photographs of the blood cast off, were lost?
Yes, I am.
Are you also aware that certain digital files of the crime scene became partially corrupted?
Yes, I was.
Isn't it true that in your statement you said you were not able to recreate all segments or place all the evidence?
Yes, that's true.
Do you think you would need more evidence to come to a conclusion?
No, I do not. I think that with the evidence I had, I came to a very accurate conclusion.
But you said you would prefer that you had more physical evidence, right?
Yes, I said I would prefer more evidence as I would in any case, but again, I think I came to an accurate conclusion.
May I direct your attention to what has been previously marked as Exhibit 8? Permission for my co-counsel to screen share, Your Honor.
Granted.
What does Exhibit 8 show?
This shows the knife block that is in the kitchen of the victim's house.
How do you know this?
Because I examined this knife block.
Is it a fair and accurate representation?
Yes.
Has it been altered in any way?
No, I don't believe so.
Your Honor, we move to enter Exhibit 8 into evidence.
Ms. Brisky, do you have any objections?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right. Exhibit 8 is admitted. Go ahead, Ms. Maestas.
What was the brand of the knife that matched the incision in Mr. Brackman?
It was a large chef's kitchen knife.
And isn't it true that this knife does not match the rest in the set in this block as shown in Exhibit 8?
Yes, that's true.
Let's move on. Do you know Blake Van Owen?
Yes, I do.
Isn't it true that some of Van Owen's conclusions fall outside of your area of expertise?
Yes.
Is there any bad blood between you and Van Owen?
I wouldn't say that there's bad blood between us. We are rivals in work, but I don't think that personally there's nothing between us.
That is all. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Brisky, do you have any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Ms. Kuzak, you believe that you have sufficient data and evidence in this case to come to your final conclusion, right?
Yes, I do.
And you have no bad blood whatsoever with Blake Van Owen, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Maestas, any recross?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. Prosecution, do you want to call your next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Alex Fuentes to the stand.
Hello, Ms. Fuentes. You're still under oath. Go ahead, Ms. And I know your name is said differently than it's spelled, so say it again for me, please.
Nelsh.
Nelsh. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Nelsh.
Good afternoon, Ms. Cifuentes. Please spell your name, or please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Alex Cifuentes, Sifuentes.
What school are you currently enrolled in?
Colorado High School.
And what grade are you in?
I'm a senior.
Do you know Avery Becker?
Yes.
What is your relationship with her?
Avery Becker and I have always been really good friends. We went to the same high school, and I'd been doing mock trial with her since I was a freshman.
Are you aware of this accusations of you and Avery not being friends and more being enemies?
Yes.
What do you think about these accusations?
I mean, I think they're totally ridiculous. Me and Alex have always been good friends.
Can you tell us a little bit about Avery and your interactions with her on the mock trial team?
Excuse me, Your Honor. My client uses he, him pronouns.
Sorry. Rephrasing the question. Can you tell us a little bit about Avery and your interactions on the mock trial team?
Yes, Avery and I were pretty equally skilled team members. Our only difference was I put a lot of preparation into my roles while he just didn't.
Tell me a little more about Avery's participation on the team.
Well, like I said, Avery was a really skilled mock trial member. He was not only a really good lawyer, but he was also really good at making things up on the witness stand. His only issue was that he was never prepared and always late.
Was Avery ever approached about these frustrations by anyone?
Yes, Mr. Brackman was always talking to Avery about the importance of hard work and preparation. And Mr. Brackman even demoted Avery to the B team after he was late so many times. Based on what I observed, Avery hated Mr. Brackman for this.
Was there anything else that you saw Avery do that made Mr. Brackman mad?
Yes, one day Avery got really angry and wrote Worst Attorney Award on Mr. Brackman's Porsche 911.
Tell me about what you saw when Avery vandalized his car.
Well, Mr. Brackman was talking to Avery about the importance of being on time and being prepared, and Avery just got really angry and super compulsively grabbed a permanent marker, went out to the parking lot, and wrote in big bold letters, Worst Attorney Award on his car.
What do you know about the writing utensil that was used to write on Brackman's car?
Well, it was very clearly a Sharpie, not a dry erase marker. It was on the easel where we keep paper, not whiteboards. Avery claims that he thought it was a dry erase marker, but even if that's what he thought, he still wrote on his car.
How did Mr. Brackman respond to his car being vandalized?
I mean, he was pretty upset, but decided not to press any charges and instead just said Avery was off the team for good.
Did you see Avery after she was kicked off the team?
Yes, I saw Avery at the Fry Shack, which is a place where a lot of mockers hang out. And we actually had a very good conversation about how he should probably just move on from mock trial.
Did you hear again from Avery after that interaction?
I did. Avery texted me asking to talk to Mr. Brackman on his behalf about getting back on the team.
Permission to let my co-counsel screen share?
Granted.
Let the record reflect that I'm showing opposing counsel and jury what has been previously marked as Exhibit 14. What is Exhibit 14?
It is a screenshot of the text I received from Avery.
How do you know this?
I received the screenshots and sent them to the detective.
Is this a fair and accurate representation?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, we move for the admission of Exhibit 14.
Ms. Kiefer.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right. Exhibit 14 is admitted.
Can you tell me about what Avery texted you?
Well, Avery texted me asking if I could talk to Mr. Brackman on his behalf about getting back on the team. And I said I would, and I did. And Mr. Brackman basically said, no way. And when I told Avery that, he said, Well, if Mr. Brackman was upset about what I did to his car, just wait and see what I'll do to his house.
Moving on. Do you know Blair Rollins?
Yes, I do.
What was your relationship with Blair Rollins?
I would say we were mutual acquaintances, but definitely not good friends.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Kiefer?
I would like to cross, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Would you say that you and Avery have always been good friends?
Yes, I would.
Okay, moving on. You liked your coach, right?
Oh, yes, I really liked Mr. Brackman.
You thought he was a really good lawyer, right?
Yes, and a great coach, too.
And you said that he was frustrated with Avery quite often, right?
Yeah, he was always late and rarely ever prepared.
Would it be fair to say that you think that your work is better than Avery's?
I would say we were pretty equally skilled members. I did put a lot more preparation into my work.
And you would get frustrated with Avery's lack of work ethic, right?
Yes, the whole team would, understandably.
Moving on, after Avery got demoted to B team, he asked you to help him get back on A team, right?
Yes, he did.
Did you see Avery on March 5th?
Yes.
And he gave you his phone to play games on, right?
Yes, briefly, and I gave it back.
You know that Avery lost his phone on March 6th, right?
Yes.
And you say that you're not friends with Blair Rollins. You're just mutual acquaintances.
Yes, I don't even know if we ever had a class together.
Are you aware of the fact that that Mr. Brackman put Blair's dad in prison?
So I've heard, yes.
Moving on, you say that Avery texted you threatening to go trash Brackman's house, right?
Correct.
You claim to have given screenshots to the police that say that Mr. Becker planned on breaking into Mr. Brackman's house, right?
Yes, I did.
Why didn't you tell anyone that Avery was planning on trashing Mr. Brackman's house?
I don't mention that in my affidavit. Would you like me to answer?
No, thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Nelsh, do you have any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Ms. Fuentes, you're excused. All right, I believe is that all your witnesses, prosecution?
Yes, the prosecution rests.
All right. Defense, would you like to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Professor Blake Van Owen to the stand.
All right, Professor Van Owen, you are still under oath. Go ahead, Ms. Burnham.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Van Owen. Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Good evening. My name is Blake Van Owen, O-W-E-N.
Why don't we start by giving us a little information about yourself? What's your current profession, Ms. Van Owen?
I'm a private investigator and professor at CU Denver. And while I was working at CU, I taught a few courses on police practice, expert witness in police practice, and social justice. I am also an expert witness in police practice. Also, because of the hard work that I put in to obtain my master's degree, I prefer to be called Professor Van Owen.
And where did you receive this master's, Professor?
I got my master's degree in criminal justice through the Ashford University online program.
Do you have any specialties in private investigation?
Well, I regularly act as an expert courtroom witness in the areas of police practice, use of force, false arrest, and forensic evidence techniques. I also testify as an expert in crime scene reconstruction, cell tower analysis, and general police investigation tactics. I was also formerly a police officer for the Aurora Police Department.
And what's your experience giving expert witness testimony?
Well, I have been accepted as a witness as a defense expert in Colorado, Kansas, Arizona, Wyoming, Nebraska, and New Mexico. I've been in various courts as an expert in crime scene reconstruction 8 times, in cell tower analysis 5 times, and in general police investigation tactics 12 times. And I've consulted on more than 100 cases.
Your Honor, based on the witness's education and experience in the fields of forensic evidence techniques, crime scene reconstruction, cell tower analysis, and general police investigation tactics, the defense moves to enter Professor Blake Van Owen as an expert witness in all these areas pursuant to Rule 702.
Ms. Bidgood.
No objection.
All right, so I have 4 areas. Is that right, Ms. Burnham?
That's correct.
All right, she's admitted as an expert in all 4 areas. I'm just gonna go with that.
Thank you, Your Honor. What's your involvement in the case today, Professor?
Well, I reviewed the state's crime scene and cell tower reports regarding Mackenzie Brackman's death, as well as conducting my own partial investigation of the case.
And what did you review first?
Well, first I looked at the investigation of Jordan Markowitz, particularly regarding the cell tower records he acquired.
And what did these records show?
These records show repeated calls from Taylor Perkins to Avery Becker's phone, kind of like it was lost and they were trying to find it. These also show the relative location of Becker's phone.
And where did Becker's phone appear to be on March 6th, 2020?
Avery's phone was shown to be at about the area of his house, the mall, the fry shack, and yes, Mr. Brackman's house at about the time of Mr. Brackman's death.
So can this data show an exact location for Avery Becker?
Not precisely. Cell tower data is not remotely like a GPS in terms of precision. A phone may connect with a tower up to 7 miles away, which means that Becker's phone may not have even been close to Brackman's house at the time of the murder.
Was there anything else that you learned from the cell tower data?
Well, unfortunately, because only a very short window of time was investigated, there is very little else I could gain from these records. If Markowitz had gotten a wider window of data, for example, all the phones that connected in the area or multiple days worth of data, it may have been a bit more helpful.
Could you have gotten this data on your own?
I could have, but unfortunately did not. I did not have a wide enough window of time to do this, and being said that the prosecution are the ones that should have retrieved this data. I was also never required or asked to do this.
Were there any other shortcomings in Detective Markowitz's investigation?
Well, Detective Markowitz simply accepted screenshots of text messages from Alex DeFuentes' phone to use as evidence against Avery Becker, rather than actually obtaining his phone records and verifying the evidence. And as you heard earlier today, screenshots can be easily photoshopped or faked.
Could Markowitz have obtained these text messages?
Yes, he could have easily obtained this. The Aurora Police Department uses a technology called Celebrite, which allows them to download contents off of any phone. And it is beyond me why they would not use this technology in a murder investigation.
Was there anything else that you reviewed in this case, Detective?
Yes, I also reviewed the work of Kyle Cusack, where I found significant issues regarding the nature of the stabbing.
And what issues were these?
Well, first, there is knife work supported by Cusack. She thinks that the intruder wrestled control of the knife from Brackman and then proceeded to stab him in a bear-like position.
Is there anything wrong with this theory?
Well, first, the murder weapon is not the same brand or dimension as any of the other knives in the house, so it doesn't make any sense why Brackman would even have it. And second, the construction of the knife handle is conducive of stabbing in the back, not the strange bear hold. This is one of the things that made me unsure of the theory that there was a struggle.
Was there anything else that makes you suspicious of a theory of a struggle?
Yes, Cusack says that certain scuff marks near the back door point to some sort of struggle, but we have no idea how old those marks are. Also, although a victim was in possession of a Ring doorbell, which may have notified him of an intruder, we have no way of knowing whether notifications were turned on because there was no follow-up on the user account records.
You mentioned ring videos. Was there anything else you learned from these?
Well, I learned that the intruder was definitely not big enough to have bear hugged Brackman. I also learned that the intruder was the same size and build as another suspect in this case, Blair Rollins.
Do you know who Blair Rollins is?
I gained knowledge of Blair Rollins during my investigation of this case.
And who is she?
Well, Rollins is an alum of Colorado High School where Mr. Brackman was the mock trial coach. Moreover, their dad was a client of Mr. Brackman's, who was sent to prison for life. There's actually an auto recording of him threatening Brackman after the hearing.
Do you know what this recording says?
It says along the lines of, I'll get you Brackman. I'll get you back, Brackman, if it's the last thing I do.
Was Blair Rollins present when this recording was taken?
Yes, she was. She had testified for her dad during the hearing, and so she would have known about this threat.
And in your expert opinion, Professor Blake Van Owen, is it possible that Blair carried out this threat for her father?
Absolutely. It is a far stronger motive for murder than simply being kicked off the mock trial team. Moreover, Rollins was absent from school on the day of the murder, leaving them with no alibi.
And where is Rollins now?
Well, Rollins is effectively missing in action. I tried to get a hold of them during my investigation, but it seems they've disappeared after their graduation, so my guess is that they're no longer in state.
Thank you, Professor Van Owen. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Bidgood. Do you have some cross?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Professor Van Owen. You're a private investigator, correct?
Yes.
Is it true that you quit being a police officer because you disagree with their methods?
Objection? Relevance?
I will discuss the relevance later. It's helping with the other questions.
Can you clue the court into a little bit, please?
Yes. I believe that Professor Van Owen's motives for this case might be corrupt because they have ulterior motives against the police force.
I'm going to go ahead and overrule the objection. Go ahead, Ms. Bidgood.
Is it true that you quit being Is it true that you think of yourself as the check on the power of police?
I myself am not a check on the power of police, but I do think that it helps to have some sort of back to it.
Is it true that you've only ever worked for the defense?
Yes.
Would you say that you're in the defense because it pays well?
No.
But is it true that you're making $8,000 on this case?
Yes.
And is it true that that's on the higher end of money you can make on a case?
Possibly. Wages range from higher than what I have to a lot lower than what I'm gaining.
All right, let's talk about Avery Becker. Is it true that you reviewed the doorbell footage?
Yes.
The Ring doorbell footage shows someone with a small build entering the house, correct?
That is correct.
Would you consider Avery to have a small build?
Not necessarily.
So why were you investigating Avery if the person on the Ring doorbell had a small build?
I was not investigating Avery. I was investigating the Ring because it had to do with the case and because I suspected another suspect of this case, Blair Rollins.
All right, moving on. Let's talk about the knife work. Is it true that the intruder was much smaller than Brackman?
Yes.
So it would be very hard for the intruder to have won a struggle with Brackman, you say?
Yes.
But it's possible that if Brackman were sitting down, Avery could have stabbed him from behind.
A person of Avery's size would still have a trouble because I would think that Brackman would put up a fight.
But you're saying that it is possible that a person of the same build as Avery could have stabbed Brackman.
Yes, but Blair Rollins is also the same build as Avery, which makes her also a suspect in this case.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bidgood. Ms. Burnham, do you have any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Professor Van Owen, would you let any personal bias that you might have get in the way of your work?
No.
And in your expert opinion, who do you think is the most likely suspect in this case?
As I stated before, I think Blair Rollins has a much stronger motive and is a much more likely suspect.
Thank you, Professor. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Professor. Ms. Bidgood, do you have any recross?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Professor Van Owen. Ms. Burnham or defense, do you want to call your next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Taylor Perkins to the stand.
Hello, Ms. Perkins, you're still under oath. Go ahead, Ms. Maestas.
Good evening, Ms. Perkins. Will you please state your name and spell your last for the record?
Taylor Perkins, Perkins.
Do you know Avery Becker?
I sure do.
And how do you know Avery Becker?
Avery is pretty much my best friend. We've been best friends for all of high school. We were on the same mock trial team together.
Do you know what mock trial is?
Yes, I do.
Were you and Avery on the same team?
Avery and I were on the same team. However, once Avery was demoted to B team, we were no longer on the same team.
And why did Avery get demoted?
Avery got demoted because about a month prior to the regionals tournament, Avery came in more unprepared than he ever was. And so with that, Mr. Brackman and Avery often got into arguments with each other. They always got heated with each other. And so Brackman demoted Avery to B team.
And who is Mackenzie Brackman?
Mackenzie Brackman, he was our mock trial coach.
How was Avery's relationship with Mr. Brackman?
Oh, they did not get along. They had very different views of mock trial. He liked things to be orderly and everyone to be prepared. Avery did things better on the fly. Avery was really great at improvising, so they never really got along.
Did something happen at the regional tournament?
At the regionals tournament, everything went pretty well. Avery clearly had it prepared beforehand. However, he still did great. He ended up getting the best attorney award and the best closing argument.
And what happened to Mr. Brackman's car after the regional tournament?
Once Avery was demoted to B team, I had dropped out, so I wasn't there any longer. So I wasn't there at the practice once Avery got back onto A team. But I heard it from Avery that they had argued. Brackman said that Avery didn't deserve the award, which was pretty hard.
Ms. Maestas?
The statement is not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, but rather for the effect it had on the person who heard the statement.
Ms. Brisky?
I would argue that it is offered for the truth of the matter asserted, and yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and sustain the objection. Please move on, Ms. Maestas.
How would you describe Avery?
A great and nice person, a good friend. However, a little bit impulsive.
Moving on. Do you know who Alex Cifuentes is?
I do.
And what was Avery's relationship with Alex Cifuentes?
They were on the outside. They seemed okay with each other. Alex claimed that they were really close friends. However, that didn't seem to be the case.
Did you know that Avery lost his phone?
Yes, I did know this.
And what led up to Avery losing his phone?
The night prior of Avery and I noticing it was missing, we had gone to Fry Shack, which we also saw the rest of the mock trial team. After Fry Shack, we went to the mall. And so the next morning, once Avery came over to my house to pick me up so we can go to school, we had both then realized it was missing.
What did you do when you realized Avery's phone was gone?
Once we realized it was missing, we both decided it'd be best to spend the day searching and retracing our steps. We didn't really need to go to school. Our classes were dry. We already taken our literature tests. So we spent the day going back to the fry shack and the mall to look for it.
Moving on, have you heard about the supposed text exchange between Alex and Avery?
Yes.
And what do you think of these text messages?
They most definitely seem fake. I don't think Avery would ever really say anything like that to Alex.
Do you know who Blair Rollins is?
I do.
And who is Blair Rollins?
Blair Rollins was a student who attended the same high school as me. Blair Rollins was definitely, in my eyes, a very strange kid, and I think most people would agree with me. Blair Rollins' dad was a client of Mr. Brackman's, and Blair, everyone knew about it. Blair Rollins' dad ended up losing the case.
Do you think that Avery Becker would have killed his mock trial coach?
Most definitely not. Avery and Brackman got mad at each other sometimes, sure, but Avery would never go that far on anything.
Thank you. That is all, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Brisky, do you have any cross?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Miss Perkins. You went to Colorado High School, correct?
I did.
And you're close friends with the defendant, Avery Becker, yes?
I say so.
And you would consider yourself a loyal friend, isn't that right?
I would say I was just as a loyal friend as I would be to Avery to anyone else.
But they were your best friend, correct?
Yes.
Let's talk about the deceased Mackenzie Brackman. He was your mock trial coach, right?
He was, yes.
And you believed him to be a mediocre coach, correct?
Yeah, you know what they say. If you can't do it good, then coach.
And a mediocre lawyer, yes?
Yes.
And you said that he made bad choices for the team, is that correct?
In my opinion, yes. However, he thought he was doing the best choice for the team.
But you felt those choices weren't good for the team, right?
In my opinion, yes.
And that you wouldn't guess he made any better choices for his clients, yes?
Yes.
And you observed the relationship between Avery and Mr. Brockman, correct?
I did.
And you even described their relationship to be a feud, yes?
Yes, on both ends.
And you said that this feud particularly bothered Avery, right?
Yes.
You even said that it, quote, bothered Avery enough to play some pranks on Coach, yes?
Yes. Pranks, which are intended to be harmless.
And you talked about how Avery could be rash, yes?
In moments, yes, but it was never too extreme.
And how they had an inflated ego, correct?
Correct.
And from your observations, Brockman often found Avery was unprepared at practice. Is that true?
Unprepared, yes, but they were still very good at mock trial.
But a month before the regional tournament, they were also found unprepared. Is that correct?
Yes.
In fact, you even said that Avery was making things up on the fly, yes?
Yeah.
And that they were getting off track from the prepared closing statements, yes?
Yes.
You also said in your statement that you knew Avery didn't try that hard, right?
Avery didn't have to.
But they didn't try very hard, yes?
They didn't.
And so Avery was demoted from A team to B team, correct?
Temporarily, but yes.
And so when they were initially demoted from A team to B team, you decided to step down from the A team yourself in order to support your friend, yes?
Yes, I knew that I would be able to put Avery back onto A team, which they most definitely deserved.
Let's talk about the practice where, quote, everything blew up. You weren't there when Avery rode on your coach's car, right?
Right.
But you heard all about it from Avery, yes?
I did.
And from their side of the story, you learned that Avery was upset, yes?
Of course.
And you learned about how Avery wrote Worst Attorney Award right on the hood of Brockman's beloved Porsche 911 Carrera, yes?
Yes.
You also later found out that the marker she used was a permanent marker, correct?
Marker he used. And Avery and I both knew that we both found out later afterwards that it was a permanent marker.
My apologies. You also discovered that this action ruined the paint on that Porsche, yes?
Yes.
But when you found out about this situation, you just said Avery just wanted to let off some steam. Isn't that right?
Of course, Brackman was definitely out of line. So was Avery, but Avery had a right to be upset.
Upset enough to ruin the paint on her coach's car.
That was not the intention.
But she was upset enough to write on the hood of the car.
Yes.
And even though you believe that is out of line, as you just said, you think that it was okay because Brockman was also out of line.
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Maestas, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Where were you on the day of Mr. Brackman's murder?
In the morning, Avery came and picked me up to go to school together. However, we decided not to so we can search their phone. We were at Fry Shack and the mall for the majority of the day.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Any recross, Ms. Brisky?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Perkins. Defense, do you want to call your last, I believe it's your last witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would like to call Avery Becker to the stand.
All right. Mr. Becker, you are still under oath. Go ahead, Ms. Kiefer.
Good evening, Mr. Becker. Please state your name and spell it for the record.
My name is Avery Becker, Becker.
Why are you here today, Mr. Becker?
I've been falsely accused of murdering my ex-mock trial coach, Mackenzie, or as I called him, Mr. Brackman.
Where did you go to school last year?
I went to Colorado High School, but we all like to call it CHS.
Why did you decide to join mock trial?
You know, it was a fun way to get out of the house. I got to hang out with my best friend, Taylor Perkins, and it was really fun, and I ended up being really good at it.
What was your relationship with Mr. Brackman?
I mean, he didn't really like anyone, especially me. He didn't like me, and I kind of thought of him as a lousy lawyer, but you know, I respected him and he got us to work and I was on his team for 4 years. He was just mad that I was able to make up closers on the fly and that mock trial came easily to me.
How good were you, in your personal opinion, at mock trial?
I was really good. I did what I would call spin a web and I came up with stuff on the fly and I won best of closer and best attorney at regionals. It just came naturally to me.
What was regionals like for you?
Like I said, I won the best attorney award and the best closing award, though Brackman didn't think to agree.
What happened to practice after regionals?
So that Tuesday after regionals, he started saying that I didn't deserve the award. I should have just stuck to the script and that I relied on my good looks. I mean, at least he said something true about me, but I was really mad. So I took what I thought was a dry erase marker that we were using at practice, and I ended up writing on his car, worst attorney award.
How did he respond after seeing this?
Well, at first after practice, he came up to me and started apologizing for what he said earlier. But once he saw his car, he flipped out, as he should, and kicked me off the mock trial team, which made me furious. I mean, my mock trial career was over. And if it wasn't for me, we wouldn't have even gone to state.
Were you aware the marker was permanent?
No, not at all. As I said earlier, we were using that same marker during practice on the whiteboards.
Did you tell anyone what had happened?
Well, of course, I told my best friend Taylor, and I really tried to tell my mom. I had only gotten out that I said that Brackman had gotten mad at me, but I was crying the whole time because I just felt horrible for what I had done.
How did you feel the next day?
I still felt really bad for blowing up at him and writing on his car. And I really wanted to apologize in person and offer to fix it. So I tried going to his office, but his secretary said that he didn't want to see me. As I said, I really wanted to apologize in person, but I figured that might not be an option. So I ended up texting him and apologizing and offering to even get a summer job to pay for it.
Moving on, what is your relationship with Alex Fuentes?
I mean, we were on mock trial together, and Alex likes to think that we're best friends, even though I don't like her at all, and we've never been friends. I mean, she's always just jealous of me, and the absolute last person I'd ever ask for help.
Do you know who Blair Rollins is?
I mean, I know her a little bit. I know that Blair's dad had gone to jail because Brackman was a lousy attorney, but other than that, I don't really know much.
What does Blair look like?
Oh, Blair and I almost look exactly alike. I mean, some describe us as both having a small figure, and people say that we look exactly alike.
What is your perception of Blair and Alex's relationship?
It seemed that they were pretty good friends, almost too good friends, if you know what I mean. It seemed that they were out to get me.
What is your relationship with Taylor Perkins?
As I've said, Taylor is my best friend. We did mock trial together. We love to hang out, and Taylor even quit the mock trial team just so I could stay on.
Where were you on March 5th?
After school, Taylor and I went to the Fry Shack where all the cool kids like to hang out, and we just played games on my phone.
Who were you with?
Taylor was there, as I said, and Alex was there for a little bit.
What were you doing on March 6th?
Well, that morning I noticed that I couldn't find my phone anywhere. And so Taylor came to my house and suggested that we take the day off of school. I mean, we had first period off and we had already taken the literature quiz, so it seemed like a good idea. And we just spent the whole day looking for it. We went back to the Fry Shack, we went back to the mall. And when we were at the Fry Shack, we saw the other team and asked what happened and why they weren't at practice. And they said that Brackman never showed up and that the 15-minute rule applied.
How did you try to find your phone?
Well, as I said, we went to the mall, we went to the Fry Shack, tried to retrace our steps, and Taylor just called it over and over on her phone, but it went straight to voicemail.
Moving on, are you aware of the text messages Alex claims to have received from you?
Well, according to my lawyers, they claim to say that I wanted to go to Brackman's house to trash it, but I didn't even know where he lived, and I didn't even have my phone, and I'd never go to Alex to help. And especially after what I did to his car, I would never go near Brackman ever again.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Nelsh, do you have some cross?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead.
Good evening, Ms. Becker. Is it true that you joined mock trial specifically to hang out with Taylor and play on your phone?
No, not at all.
Originally you joined to do this?
Nope. Originally, it just was a fun way to get out of the house, and sure, Taylor and I did it together so we could hang out, but it was never our intention to go on our phone. I mean, as the practices progressed and the years went on, sure, we did go on our phone a bit. I mean, Mr. Brackman would keep us for practice after school for hours. What did you expect us to do?
Okay. And then after trying mock trial for a while, you liked it a lot, yes?
Yeah, and I was really good at it.
But despite enjoying it so much, you didn't choose to put a lot of effort into it, right?
I put all the effort I needed to. I won best attorney and best closing. I don't know what else you expect from me.
But you wouldn't prepare before trials?
I work better when I'm on the fly and under a lot of pressure.
Did this lead to a grudge forming between you and Brackman?
I mean, not really, though he hated my work ethic. He always gave me the experts and always let me do the closings, like the best part and the hardest part of the trials.
Is it true that you argued with Brackman at almost every practice?
I mean, not every practice, but sure, I guess you could say.
And you almost always talked back to him when you were having these arguments, correct?
Yeah.
And then when he bumped you down to B team, you were very angry, correct?
Who wouldn't be? I worked so hard to be on A team, and to get demoted to B team, who wouldn't be mad?
And when you and Brackman started to fight again, you were angry enough to write on his car.
Yeah, with a dry erase marker, but it turned out to be permanent. I never intended it to be harmful.
But you still intended to write on his car.
Yes, as a prank.
And you used a Sharpie to do this, right?
That was not my intention. It was a dry erase mark. It's what I thought was a dry erase marker that we were using earlier that practice.
Is it true that you didn't notice your phone was missing until the very next day?
That's correct.
However, you said that your mom takes your phone at night, right?
Yeah.
So is it possible that your mom had your phone and you hadn't noticed?
No, I mean, it could have been, but that's not in my statement, and I don't think so personally.
Moving on. In your text messages with Alex, you admitted to going in and trashing his house, yes?
I didn't send those texts, and I didn't even know about them until my attorneys told me.
But in those text messages, that's what you admitted, allegedly.
Not what I admitted.
Lastly, you said that you would get back at Brackman if it was the last thing you did, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was in the heat of the moment, and I, of course, the next day regretted everything that I had done.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Kiefer, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
What did you think of Mr. Brackman as a coach?
I mean, he was pretty good. I mean, while lousy, I guess some of the time, I really respected him. And it was a really good 4 years I had with him.
And you say that mock trial is your passion, right?
It is. I loved it so much.
Oh, why did you say that you would get back Mr. Brackman back?
Because, you see, I was just upset. He'd taken away my win. He always discredited me. And I wanted to get back at him, but not permanently. And of course, not by killing him.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Nelsh, any recross?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. Any further witnesses, defense?
The defense rests.
All right. Thank you. Looks like we're now going to go ahead and do closing arguments. Are the parties ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Go ahead.
Right place, right time, right defendant. This is a case where there is just too much evidence against the defendant, Avery Becker, for killing Mackenzie Brackman for this murder to be a coincidence. It is not a wrong place, wrong time situation. It is a purposeful break-in by Avery Becker that ended in a murder. The evidence in this case has shown that Mackenzie Brackman was killed by one of his very own students, Avery Becker. On March 6, 2020, Avery Becker committed second-degree burglary and also ended up killing Mackenzie Brackman. And my co-counsel and I have proven this beyond a reasonable doubt, so we ask that you return a verdict of guilty. Avery Becker was a hot-headed member of the mock trial team at Colorado High School who was unable to control his anger. He was on the A team, coached by Mr. Brackman, the mock trial team's beloved coach. You heard Alex Fuentes say that Avery wasn't putting in as much work as the other team members, and although Brackman had talked to him about it, he didn't care enough to put in enough effort. After the regional competition, he lectured him, which made him mad enough to grab a Sharpie and write on Brackman's car, "World's worst attorney." Finally, after Brackman had had enough, he kicked Avery off the team, giving him a motive for the murder. Avery often did things he later regretted. You heard Detective Jordan Markowitz say that Avery's cell phone was in the area of Brackman's house at the time of the murder. You heard her say that although Becker entered the house to burgle it when Brackman wasn't there, he panicked and ended up murdering him. Lastly, you heard her say that she received text messages from Ms. Fuentes. In those messages, the defendant admitted to planning on going in and trashing Mr. Brackman's house. You heard Kyle Kuzak say that the perpetrator who was caught on the Ring door video had the same height and build as Avery Becker. Secondly, you heard that there was a knife missing from the knife block in the house. When the murder weapon was recovered, it found to be a knife that fit missing space. This indicated that the murder was unplanned. Next, you heard her say that Blake Van Owen's theory about the defendant sneaking up behind Brackman to stab him was laughable and most likely untrue. Mr. Brackman was not just an attorney, he was a really good one, and he was able to pass on his love for law by teaching other high school students and growing their love for law too. Today, You have heard Mr. Brackman Mr. Brackman repeatedly asked Avery to prepare more for mock trial, but Avery simply refused to do so. Avery disliked Brackman. She wrote on his car, and he texted Alex Fuentes that he was going to break into Brackman's house. All of this evidence is not just a coincidence. It is proof that Avery Becker killed Mr. Brackman. Regardless of whether or not Avery knew he had a Sharpie in hand, he was still intending to write on Brackman's car, which is a finable offense. He entered Brackman's house with the intent to burglarize it, and he ended up killing him too. This is a perfect example of a person not being able to control their anger. As this trial ends, we ask that you find Avery Becker guilty of murder in the first degree, as well as second-degree burglary on March 6, 2020. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Nelsh. Defense, are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead, Ms. Maestas.
Garbage in, garbage out. First, let me remind you of the burden of proof that states that the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that my client, Avery Becker, is guilty. I can most assuredly say that they have failed to do so. The case of the prosecution began with bad evidence that led to an incorrect conclusion. The investigation was flawed, leaving out key pieces of evidence and being inconsistent with the conclusions that they made. They even lost evidence, and yet they still pertained to accuse my client. They made a conclusion and then made the evidence fit the bias they already had in their minds. That is why we ask that you find the defendant not guilty. From Blake Van Owen, a reputable private investigator, you have heard that the case was rushed and that the conclusion does not fit most of the evidence. Alex Cifuentes provided an unstable interpretation, making one-sided claims that she was best friends with Avery and that she got text messages from Avery claiming that he was enraged at Mr. Brackman, when in fact, he was just apologetic. Kyle Kuzak created a deeply flawed investigation with a heavy confirmation bias that ignored clear facts and mishandled evidence. Avery lost his cell phone the day of the murder and spent the whole day with Taylor Perkins trying to find it. It wouldn't make sense for him to be both looking for his phone and have it with him and trying to break into Brackman's house. Avery's lost phone wouldn't have been able to answer any of Taylor's calls, much less Alex's texts, which would have been less important. Alex Cifuentes is an unreliable source of evidence. It is entirely impossible that he took Avery's phone himself and gave it to Blair Rollins to try to frame Avery, or even fabricated the text messages herself. Why would Avery give her greatest rival something to use against him and not tell his best friend? It does not add up. The many inconsistencies in this case do not paint a clear picture of who did it. Once again, I would like to remind the jury of the burden of proof. The prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Avery Becker is guilty. The prosecution has failed to do so. They created a conclusion before the case was conducted, and with this bias, they cannot have made an objective conclusion. It is for this reason that we have proved that the jury must find the defendant not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maestas. Ms. Nelsh, would you like to use your remaining time?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
We have not failed to meet our burden of proof. Both Detective Markowitz and Kyle Kuzak went through detailed processes with sufficient evidence to come to the conclusion that Avery Becker is the perpetrator guilty of murder and burglary. And also, let me remind you that we are not trying to prove anybody else, like perhaps Blair Rollins, of committing this crime. We are only trying to prove that Avery Becker did do it. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, everybody. Good job. If everybody wants to turn their cameras back on, we will give the scorers a few minutes to finish their tabulation. Take a deep breath. You finished your first day. Good job, everybody. Woohoo! Excellent job, everyone. Scorers, are you still scoring? Thumbs up if you're still scoring. Okay, let me know when you're done.
Good, done.
You're done. Mr. Prey, are you done with your score sheet?
I am done. Thank you.
Excellent. Ms. Warren? Oh, you're on mute, sorry.
No, I'm not done, sorry.
Okay, take your time. We're gonna do a little critique while you finish yours, okay? All right, Mr. Prey or Mr. Hep, do either one of you want to do a little discussion?
Yeah, I'll talk about it. I saw some very good attorneys here. Controlled, precise. They dug into the questions very well. They made sure that the witnesses were under their control. I saw some witnesses who had some very good responses, and I had some, it's fun to see a witness and attorney go back and forth and spar a little bit. So I saw a couple of those, and I enjoyed that. I'm not going to be too specific about it, but as I think this might be my 6th year of doing this, and every year I enjoy it. My wife, who is an attorney and a coach, she says, "Please do this," and I go, "All right," and then I get into it, and I go, "Oh, that's fun." So I had a great time. Thank you very much for the performances. I'm very glad I was here.
Thank you, Mr. Prey. Mr. Hep?
I'll build off that. Overall, I was very impressed. I don't have any negatives to throw out there, which is great. I thought everyone used their time well. And sometimes that means you use a little more of it. Sometimes it means you use a little less. And so I thought it was appropriate and smart on that. And then just everyone from the attorneys to the witnesses, really nice use of detail and command of detail. It not only makes it more interesting, it's more realistic of how things are going to work. I think it presents better to mock trial judges, but it also shows your depth of preparation and just how much you've done to get ready for this. And then when you're on the spot, you actually are putting it out there and recalling it all. And so really nice work. Good luck tomorrow.
All right, how are you doing, Miss Warren? Oh, look, you're on mute still, yeah.
Yep.
Are you still working?
Yes.
Excellent, okay.
Won't be long.
Your Honor, I do have a question. Charles, I have not gotten your score sheet yet for some reason.
Oh,
don't know if it's
for this
submitted
round?
or not for sure, but we did
Just a
not
moment.
receive it yet.
There it is. Oh, shoot.
All right, well, I appreciate everybody. You did an excellent job today. I think probably the first thing that threw you was the first expert, and I asked you some more questions. I am a little bit of a hot bench judge. Sorry, everybody. And I do like to ask questions and want to hear what you have to say. So you will run across judges that do that. So just be ready to not just give the standard response, but explain why. Okay. One thing to note, listen to how the judge rules, because I did overrule an objection and the attorney didn't go back and ask the question again and allow her witness to answer. Okay, so make sure you're listening to what the judge and what is happening. There's a lot to pay attention to, so just make sure that you are listening and reacting to what's actually happening, not maybe what you anticipate will happen. Okay. Ms. Perry, I very much enjoyed you as a witness. Thank you for embodying your character. As a former witness in a mock trial as a high school student many years ago, I loved being a witness, and I could tell you were very much enjoying it. So thank you. One other thing, there are other things to say besides moving on. Okay, so if you want to change topics, go ahead and say, I'm going to change to a new topic. Let's talk about so-and-so, blank and blank, okay? all of you were using moving on and just using moving on. So mix it up if you have some thoughts on it, okay? I know you're in the middle of this, so don't do it if you can't, okay? And Mr. Benedict, I do owe you a little apology. You came in late and I called you Miss Benedict, and I do apologize. I wasn't paying, you were just flashed in and I didn't pay close enough attention, so I apologize. Thank you for adding his to your name for me.
It's all right. I get it all the time. I didn't want to correct you just because I wanted to get started.
Nope, that's okay, and I apologize. Miss Warren, did you get your score sheet in?
I have completed mine.
Excellent. Do you have any comments?
I think they did a good job. I look forward to, I thought the witnesses were good. I look forward to seeing them all become attorneys.
Yes, and good luck to you guys the rest of your day. Do you have any questions? And I think we just have to wait for the monitor to say we're all good. Eat something tonight and drink some water and then go to bed. Because tomorrow will be a long day.
Yes, it will.
All right now I want you guys to all wait, if you don't mind, until we have received Mrs. Warren's. We did get yours, Chuck. Thank you very much. So we're good on that one. Just waiting to let the system move so we can get the other email in, okay? And it's not so far on you, Miss Warren, just so you know.
Mr. Hepp, what kind of law do you do?
I'm a deputy district attorney. I'm up in Jefferson County. I was in Arapahoe for a long time, but just moved to Jeffco about 5 weeks ago.
All right, Mr. Prey, what do you do?
I'm a retired civil engineer and land surveyor. My wife is a coach at Regis, and that's what got me into this. I think this might be my 6th year of scoring mock trial, and every year I love it. When I first start, I'm going like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And then the kids get started and I go, yeah, I want to do this. I love it I love to watch their performances.
Thank you for volunteering.
You're welcome.
Ms. Warren, what kind of law have you practiced?
Oh, I do mostly probate and estate work. Never done any criminal law, unfortunately. I have done this in person, and it's more fun in person.
Yeah.
You
Can't
get
wait.
you get to see everybody, and you have a better feel for them, I think.
I will be glad to get back to being in the courtrooms.
Right. I would too.
All right, on that note, guys, we do have everybody's score sheets in now. Thank you so much for all your help and all your work today. Please go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and stop the live stream and end this, and we will see you guys tomorrow morning bright and early, all right?
All right. Good job, everyone.